Welcome back to the library. I am the recorder, and today we are going to have a quick ramble on one of the most esoteric and confusing topics for one to try to cover. That of time, how it flows, and how individuals can, have, and do move across it, and how they are classified. My perceptive patrons, regular visitors, and new guests, I do not intend to get into these most confusing of temporal topics without first laying some groundwork and foundation as to terms and concepts. I intend to keep these rambles to a digestible length to better temper my own proclivity to tangent, so we will begin with general information. Of course, if there are any points of confusion or queries to be asked, don't hesitate. To begin with, let us address the fact that for the overwhelming majority of the people of the realms, their interactions, if any, with time manipulation are benign. In most cases, they are insignificant within the greater tides of time. Things such as teleportation, slowing or speeding the relative flow of time for subjects, even freezing objects or people inside of time. All of these uses of time and temporal energies are well within the bounds of both the knowledge and skill of those who wield them and constructed the spells thus, and they are safe as any other magic or metaphysical power is. However, for some, time manipulations are of a grander scale, and thus risky to the health of the timeline. For the flow of time is constant, but actions that go beyond their intent more often than not. It is a well-known fact that nearly every one of the 4 groups that became part of the V's had traveled across the stream and flow of time on multiple occasions during their rise to divinity. The actions taken, the information gained, all proved vital to each group's victories and eventual elevation to godhood. Many heroes of destiny, likewise, will see their path cross the flow of time, as their callings often require similarly extreme measures to be taken to ensure victory. Beyond the calling of the gods or of destiny, there do exist those that swim the tide of time in incredibly complex and multi-layered plots and plans, stitching together past and present for the endeavors of future gain, as well as those who stand against such things, who look to preserve the flow of time uninterrupted as possible. For while in the realms, her timeline is not so fragile as to be easily ended even with a series of paradoxes, there are still consequences for the creation of such aberrations, and those to deal with those consequences. Those, however, are a topic of a future discussion. Of the relatively few that engage on time with this level of power, interest, or ability, there are 4 general categories or classifications. The first and by far most common of these simply being known as time travelers. And while they do cross the streams and tides of time, their reliance on another more powerful temporal manipulator or a device or artifice of some kind to effect that travel makes them by far the least dangerous of those that do so. This is the fact that time travelers are not the ones powering the travel. They may be steering it via a pre-constructed framework, and most devices or other works of time manipulation of this nature will have fail-safes and limitations built in or imposed upon it to prevent disaster. The most basic of these is that the age of the reign of the Daemon Vanson, beginning to end, is a hard line that is simply unbreachable. due to the utter chaos contained within it. Even trying to jump to the early years after the daemon's defeat proves far more challenging than most can manage. However, with our next 3 groups, this is not the case. All of the following groups are not only capable of directly steering and directing themselves and others through the flow of time, but being able to shield themselves from the many intrinsic dangers of doing so. They are known as the Time Walkers, the Lords of Temporsis, and the Chronokame. Of these 3 groups, the Time Walkers are the least skilled and powerful, with the Lords of Temporsis above them, with only the Chronokame surpassing their skill and ability. Note, this is not merely a measure of how far one can move in time, while that does increase as well, but also their ability to interact with parallel and alternate time flows. Time Walkers have almost no ability to interact or otherwise use parallel and alternate time flows. However, they can recognize and identify them. However, their ability to move through their core timeline back and forth far surpasses that of even the most well-traveled of time travelers, and this is entirely due to their far deeper and hands-on understanding of the flow and mechanisms of time. They are able to, with great care, cross the age of the rain to the time before the summoning of Vanson. However, it should be noted that entering the time of the rain itself is, while possible by Chronokame, but definitely not Lords of Temporsis or Time Walkers, and even then it is still beyond many of them to do with any degree of safety. The Lords of Temporsis can interact with parallels and alternates and even pull people and objects from them temporarily. This is of course dangerous, as it would be very possible to create a paradox by doing so, and is generally not done for any length more than absolutely needed. The Lords of Temporsis are also capable of crossing their species genesis plane in their core timeline. That is, to go to a point in time that predates the creation or emergence of their own race. Even Chronokame are bound by this danger presented by parallels and alternates, and further danger still if they choose to, instead of pulling from, deciding to travel to alternate or parallel time flows within their reach. And this escalated danger comes from the fact that parallels and alternates are far more susceptible to paradoxical damage and void dissolution than the core timeline from which they are spawned. Chronokame are the only known time wielders and manipulators able to approach the chaos that is the time before time, and even then with only dire purpose or need. Core, alternate, and parallel timelines, what they are, and how they interact with each other will be covered in fuller depth in a future entry. However, for now, let us understand that great destruction can come from the mishandling of interactions between these normally separate flows of time. In short, however, one's core timeline is the one from which they originate, with parallels and alternates being separate time flows with varying degrees, sometimes radical, of difference. What separates parallel and alternates is how similar they are to, and how they interact with, the core timeline, as well as their difference in vulnerability to paradoxes that can result from those interactions, with parallels being far less capable of enduring the effects. A final mention before I wrap up this short ramble on the types of temporal travelers is that for most, looking into the future is only rarely done, and traveling even less so. This is for the simple fact that merely looking forward does not ensure that one is seeing events as they will play out for sure. The vast array of variables makes doing so dangerous, as foresights and the prophecies it can produce can often be a trap for their own fulfillment, and even the chronokami are wary of letting their temporal gaze rest for too long on the possibilities and probabilities of events in the future. While many spells and rites do peer into the future, they are both far too limited in reach and accuracy to present a danger in this way. To the scales of time, a year is but a brief flash, and even a decade presents so many variables and possibilities as to make prognostications unreliable at best, and as mentioned, a trap at worst. I hope this short ramble will serve as a firm start into our look at time travel in the realms of Jam'mar, as there are many of its stories, heroes, and history that follow people who travel its tides, and an understanding of how and why they are capable of doing such will aid in obtaining a fuller grasp of these details and stories. Perceptive patrons, regular visitors, and of course, new guests of the library, I want to thank you for your time, your interest, and of course, your support of both the Realms of Jam'mar and Gryphon's Library. Next time, with the who's of time travel briefly covered, we will expand to the what of time travel, the topics of core, parallel, alternate, and prime timelines, and as well as covering how the celestial force of Temporces deals with paradoxes, which can often result from the crossing of these timelines. Until you next make your way back to the library for another entry of Intro to the Realms, I have been the Recorder, and by the 9 and 4, be well, take care of yourselves and each other. If you'd like to contribute to the further exploration and explanation of the realms, please consider leaving a comment, a like, and sharing the video around. I read all the comments and make efforts to reply to each. Thank you for helping to grow the channel, and know I look forward to each and every one of your comments. Other methods of support can be found in the channel's description. Thank you for watching,